today we are super excited because we have Fisker with us. She was until recently the VP of People at Pleo. And before that, she's been working with global organizations such as Lego and Nestle as their head of talent. Anna, or Fia, apologies, welcome to the ramp.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
So today, what fascinates me is sort of the big topic about how do you balance employee well-being with a performance-based culture, and can those two concepts coexist? So let's start with breaking it down. What is employee well-being to you?
I think it's so interesting that you're positioning it as if they can coexist. To me, they very much coexist. I think, but I can get much more into that later on. But well-being is, I don't think there's one definition of well-being. I think it's extremely individual what well-being is. And that's what makes it so damn difficult sometimes for people teams to navigate. But I think well-being is when you're in a place where you thrive, you can perform, and you're in a healthy state. It doesn't mean happy. I think that's what's important to kind of make a point about, because a lot of organizations or a lot of leaders that I meet, they think that their people have to be happy to be doing well. And I think life, as you know, it comes in ups and downs, and it's our ability to be able to navigate ups and downs and to be able to assess our needs and meet those needs in those times as well.
What about performance culture? In your eyes, what is a performance culture?
To me, I've seen performance cultures that work well and performance cultures that don't work well. So I think there are so many different ways to define a performance culture. I think essentially it is, as the name says, right? It's a culture where people are motivated and rewarded and recognized to perform, right? You can do that through unhealthy ways where it's more the stick instead of the carrot, and you see people. I've been places where it's been very individualistic, where it's been very much focusing on individual goals, which is, in some ways can be good for the employee, and they can kind of very clearly assess where they need to be. However, I've also seen cultures where fear becomes a factor, where it becomes fear of failure. And then I've seen other places or other cultures where performance is about collaborating for a joint goal, where it becomes about achieving company success together, where it becomes about achieving something that you didn't think you could, going the extra mile. And then it should be fun, right? Performing is fun.
Yeah, it should be. And I think there are so many components to this topic. So let's sort of dive a bit into it. So let's start maybe with your journey at Pleo. What was the sort of typical challenges that you were faced with creating this balance or this coexistence for both performance and well-being?
So Pleo is a very hybrid company in the sense that we've got lots of different nationalities, lots of different cultures, lots of different locations. Some people work remotely, some people work in office. It's a very mixed bag of how we work and how we show up to work, which creates some difficulties when you think about leadership and managing performance and managing well-being as well. So it requires us to be able to customize solutions to teams and employees. So I think that's one of the things that are important to know about Pleo, that there's not really a one-size-fits-all type of approach. I think, most people, when they come to work, they want to perform and they want to make a difference. They want to make an impact, right? Especially when you, as me, come from big organizations or more well-established systems. You can look at it and you can be like, okay, that's a huge mountain to climb, and I'm only going to celebrate when I get to the top. And I think that's where people, burn out, because if you can't really celebrate the success throughout the journey, it's going to be a feeling of constantly being behind. So I think that's really key. And then I think when you work in an environment like I've done, where I have about 43 people across the world. that I don't see every day. There's to manage both performance and to manage well-being as well. It's really important to have mechanisms to understand where your people are at. And it's both in terms of like having data to understand where people are at, but also making sure that you've got a structured approach to what kind of conversations are you having? Are you having the right conversations to be able to detect where people are at so that you can offer the right level of support? So to me, some of the challenges in Pleo has been as a leader, how do I structure myself out of that? How do I make sure that I know where people are at when I don't know where they're at really? How do I prioritize? What are the right problems to focus on? And how do I make sure that I acknowledge and recognize different people's need at different times throughout the journey? I think that understanding is really key.
How do you sort of balance the qualitative data and the quantitative data when we talk about well-being? I assume you need a combination there to be able to understand the situation.
Yeah, I think, quantitative data is really good to understand the trend, right? So if I've got, we have monthly engagement data and Pleo, and I think if I get an indication that something is off in a team, I will understand that something is off, and I might know the topic or theme, but it doesn't reveal what the real problem is, and it doesn't really reveal what kind of solution would be best suited for that situation, right? So I think the qualitative is so key. You need to have the conversations to understand people, and it comes back to my first point that people are different and people have different needs, right? So to understand what is needed to help that individual or that team, for that matter, can look very, very different. Yeah. And that's where the qualitative data is key.
Yeah, makes sense. And how did you work to ensure that the leaders, because I assume the managers are key here to be able to understand the situation of the employee, to understand quickly, because the people team, obviously you're deep into the organization, you understand what's cooking, but you can't sort of see into every one-to-one conversation with manager, and I don't know if that's any fruitful. So how do you do that at scale? How do you build a system to make sure that you build those best practices?
I think it's a combination of, I think I will always be an advocate for good data. I think, having good data helps you understand and detect where the problems are. But then there's also leadership capability, right? And I've always been and if you ask people in Pleo what I'm known for, I think I'll often be described as known for the questions I ask. And that's a muscle to teach leaders as well. So leadership capability and being able to ask the right questions is crucial. And then, of course, as a people team, having solutions that can help different situations, right? Or different problems. But the leaders need to be, they're the first line, right? So they are detecting the problems. And if you don't have leaders that are really good at asking the right questions, you won't necessarily detect them.
I see a lot of companies implement well-being programs. And you mentioned that well-being is so individual in a way, and that's probably also why I've seen so many of these well-being programs failing in a way, is that you try to think about what people need, and then you try to design some fantastic benefits which are generic and not relevant for the enough people. So for the HR leaders listening to this, what would be your advice in ensuring that you build a good well-being strategy and that you make the right priorities?
Well, I think there are different recommendations for that. I think one thing is understanding your population, right? So what are the data points that tells you something about the overarching needs, right? And then I think you need to build or implement people products that offer a degree of customization. So for example, in Pleo, we've built policies that allows different flexibility at different life stages, right? Different needs. We have well-being days, and you might need well-being days for very different reasons, but you allow that flexibility. We have Mind Up as a solution where people can approach a coach or a therapist, and there will be, many different needs solved through that. But it's a solution that offers customization. Right? That would probably be my advice.
Give some directions on sort of the topics and priorities, but then be open to how to customize them for the individual.
And then you need to understand the problems, right? So if you have an organization where you can see, okay, X% are on sick leave, well, then you have a very clear problem there, and you need to understand what the root cause is of this problem. Maybe you have a company that doesn't know how to make decisions or prioritize. Then it doesn't matter if I build a very nice well-being platform and launch that. Then instead, I need to work with the leaders on how they prioritize and make decisions.
Do you have any examples where you made bad decisions on the well-being programs, where, I don't know, where data indicated that, okay, we spent too much cash here, we over-indexed on this, there was low ROI? How do you sort of evaluate these initiatives, and do you have any learnings there?
I don't think we have, we've only the programs we've launched, and the different solutions have been very well received in the organization. I think there are areas or topics where it becomes very difficult to offer solutions. So, for example, I think burnout is one of those areas of well-being that can come from so many different. So here you can build leadership programs. We also have some very well-established belonging programs that help educate on how to detect burnout, for example. But again, it comes from burnout is complicated, right? And it means it will require different things for different individuals.
And I think burnout is such a big and important topic these days. I talk to a lot of leaders, and that's a big challenge. So any successes there from Pleo or from other companies you worked at where you said, okay, these initiatives had great effect, or this is like something we introduced that really worked?
I think managing burnout or proactively working with avoiding burnout, I think is incredibly difficult. First, I'm one leader who has tried it myself as well, and I know how I didn't even understand that I was burning out. So how can I help others detect it? So it's a difficult topic, but I think one of the things that works really well in Pleo is that we've built a culture of authenticity. And what does that mean? It means that we've invested very, very heavily in authentic leadership programs. And what that means and what that has led to is that we have a culture where our leaders are quite vulnerable and open about where they're at and where their struggles are. That makes it a lot easier for the employees as well to talk about. And essentially, that's what you need. You need to create a climate and an environment where it's okay to say that I'm struggling. And then, of course, you need to make sure that what are you recognizing and rewarding your people for? Are you recognizing and one of the things in Pleo we've been talking a lot about is, well, if you always recognize and reward the people that are shutting the fires constantly, you're also building a culture of firefighting. And that's, it can be a very toxic place from a burnout perspective. So how do we make sure that leaders, they actually reward and recognize when people are taking care of themselves, when they're making good decisions about their health, when they are balancing long-term and short-term performance needs, things like that. And I think that requires that you as a leader, you are paying attention to your people and acknowledge that.
I also also a bit curious about the other side of the coin here. It's when it comes to like the high performance part. We mentioned that they can coexist, but like historically, we've seen the classical stories of Steve Jobs at Apple, Elon Musk at Tesla, sort of the no nonsense leadership style, the more like brutal, work hard, go crazy, build something world class, which is viewed as a bit sort of old school. But how do you sort of view that? Do you think that's a path for some companies, a sustainable path for some companies? Do you think with the well-being and the balance there, you also like there's a slider there where you sort of can impact performance negatively if you focus too much on well-being? Yeah, let's open that box a bit.
Well, I think all companies want to perform, right? And I think all individuals also want to go to work and make a difference. I think where well-being fits into that equation is that you can get short-term performance by stick or by like really going. You just work hard and get shit done or build things like you said before, right? But it doesn't work in the long run, right? So you need, as an organization, you need to be able to also create space for restitution for individuals and for teams. And I think that's what's difficult. And I'm not going to lie, I think it's not something where I would say, Pleo, we've just found the golden solution. I think it's something that many organizations struggle with, and we do as well. I think people thrive when they feel like they are creating value or when they're making an impact. And where they don't thrive is if they feel like they're creating or making a difference or creating impact and it's not seen or valued. That can be a stressor. It can also be a stressor when leaders, they don't care about what people are doing and they're not noticing or they're not being asked to raise the bar or something like that. Some people stop caring, and that can even be a stressor. So there's so many things that can go wrong when you create a performance environment. But I think as kind of bottom line is you can have incredibly healthy cultures where people come together to make a difference and achieve something together that also caters for that everybody needs to be in a good place. And people need downtime and restitution as well. And that's how you get talented people in the long run.
Yeah. And I do absolutely agree. I think the question is maybe more clear when we like pull that down on the individual level. Let's say you're a manager, you have a person that is not having a good time in a way, like employee well-being is low, but you can't do anything with the workload because that's sort of the speed and the quality of where your company is operating. And then you have a dissonance there between the ensuring that the employee feels well-being. And I think that's something that a lot of leaders are faced with today, is that like the work requirement is high. It's a fast-paced environment, and I can't sort of make too much customization. I can introduce different benefits and options, but at the same time, like the work requirement will remain. Maybe we can pull it down or reduce it at a period of time to get you back up. But at the same time, maybe like the question tried to be a bit clearer. It's how do you handle those situations when you are a leader and there's that gap?
Yeah, I think that's difficult, and I think many of us are faced with that all the time. And I think there is. I think you need to look at it in two different ways, right? You need to look at it from a leadership perspective, and of course, things can be done. I think you need to understand what makes your employee thrive and what is sometimes something is happening in their life situation that requires for you to do something different or, shift work in a different way or, and that's always, should always be an option for you to look at that way. But then there's another side of the coin that I've experienced many times in scale up as well, where suddenly you have this employee who was amazing in the beginning of a journey, and suddenly the job has changed, the requirements have changed, and they don't thrive anymore. And it becomes a constant struggle to not, and they don't feel great because they're never feeling like they can actually do what's expected. And here, I think the only respectful thing to do is to have honest conversations about that. I don't think I've seen it so many times where leaders, they hold on to people that are struggling, and it becomes this negative circle or spiral where the employee is really frustrated because they can't deliver the work. The manager is really frustrated because they don't know what to do. And it just becomes this negative spiral. Instead of having honest conversations about this is what the job is, if it's not possible to get you there, we need to have a conversation about what type of job will suit you. Can it be here? Great, amazing. If not, that's also great. Let me help you on how to get there. Right? I think the worst thing you can do as a leader is not having the conversations, because the employer will feel it anyway.
Good point. When we look at how you did this at scale, not necessarily this specific situation, but handling employee well-being at scale and also performance and just running a smooth people setup. Did you use any technologies, any systems, any hidden gems that you would like to share with the listeners that are coping and trying to make sense of the HR tech world?
We did, and I think like many other HR leaders, that's kind of a daily question you ask yourself: is our tech stack? What are we doing with it? How is it doing? How can we get better? I think one of the big things that we had to solve in Pleo was that we didn't have the data quality and like the core infrastructure between our tech stack. Data was not flowing, so we didn't get the right benefits out of the stack. So that's been a core issue for us to solve. We've got different solutions, like many other scale-up companies. We use Notion, we use Greenhouse for talent, we use, we have obviously our HRIS, we use Beacon for engagement. I think we use many of the systems that are well known. I think one of the things that I would have loved to implement if we were there yet, so maybe just kudos to those HR leaders out there who are already implementing this, is we started using AI obviously in recruitment and improving our sourcing efforts, looking at we use MetaView to understand interviews and guide the leaders and giving them feedback from interviews. Those technologies are super interesting to apply much broader, right, throughout the life cycle. I would have loved, to see clear in 3 years' time, what could we have done with AI across the employee life cycle. I think there's a lot of interesting things happening right now where you become much more intelligent about your work.
What's your view on that? Do you think we will see smaller people teams where tech will replace people, or do you think we'll just sort of work smarter and faster?
I'm a very optimistic person, so I think I'm not one of those that think that jobs are going to disappear. I'm one of those that think that the boring stuff is going to be automated, and the operations of people teams are going to be easier and smoother, which is going to enable us to spend much more time on the value creation and the human interaction, which is where you can't really use technology. So I think hopefully, that's my dream at least, is that we're going to be spending our time more impactful, and we're going to be much better at solving the right problems because we have the right data. So those two things I think is absolutely key. And then I think organizations are going to change in the sense that you're going to have more generalists in-house collaborating. And then I could see it the way I worked with Pleo as well, right, is that you when you need a certain level of expertise for certain projects, you pull people in. You see much more of these solo entrepreneurs who are coming in, doing a project with company, going to another company after that. And I think we will see that. So it becomes more fragmented in the sense that you bring the right skills in for the right problems to solve.
Good point. An interesting future if your hypothesis is correct.
That's what I hope is based.
Yeah. If we jump a bit back to the employee well-being topic, who is responsible for employee well-being? Is it the employee? Is it the manager? Is it the people team? Is it the executive team? Where would you place that responsibility?
I think everyone has responsibility in it. And I think first and foremost, it's important that the employee feels responsible for their own well-being. I don't think you can drive a healthy business without the employees having a sense of accountability there. Same for development, right? You need employees to own their own development. When that's said, you need to have great leaders who are able to have the right conversations with people and offer the right level of support. You need to have people teams that are building the right products that can support different situations and different needs. And then you need to have executives that are prioritizing well-being from an investment perspective. Everybody owns part of the solution. But if I had to give you one answer, I would say you have to, as an employee, own your well-being. And that also means if you're in an environment where you're not feeling good or like you should, you need to take action.
Do you have any situations where you failed as a manager, or since this seems like a job interview? No, jokes aside, any situation where you remember that I in this case I was not the best manager in the world. I could have done X, Y.
Look, I think as a leader, I don't think you ever get to perfection, right? When you're dealing with human beings, you learn all the time, and you get it wrong all the time. And then the next day you try and get just a little bit better, right? So I have a lot of examples. When we speak about well-being, I think I have a couple of examples. I have examples of where the fact that I didn't make a decision in a certain situation caused for somebody in my team once to feel so much pressure because she needed that decision and that clarity to be able to feel like she was performing. Now, I didn't think she wasn't performing, but she felt she wasn't performing because of that, right? And I didn't detect it before it was too late. So she was she was feeling really stressed and she needed to take time. And it's one of those situations where I look back and I'm like, if I had known how my lack of decision was affecting her, I would have done things differently, right? But I have, a ton of examples like that where, you learn, and we have a number of conversations, and I've learned a lot from it. And luckily she's, still in the team, and she has given me some really good feedback that I'm bringing forward as leader.
I could have given you my long list, but let's focus on something different. No, I think it's the decision vacuum is it creates so much fuss, and something to be very much aware of and over communicate as a leader when thing is stop, basically, and when you can't make that decision, you acknowledge at least the consequences of that.
Be aware that your perception of what performance is not necessarily your employee's perception, and I think that was the gap in this situation, right? She had a different expectation.
Yeah. When it comes to the well-being programs, anything that's not working that that sort of, you would say, if I'm an HR manager now designing the program, okay, this is not working, this didn't work, this had minimal ROI.
I think we have parts of our programs that have worked that where it works for some and not for others, and then we've tweaked and we've evolved different programs. So for example, I'm just thinking, so the biggest investment that we are doing are probably two initiatives. One is that we're offering free therapy at employees. And it's working well, at least from what we can see on, the data that we're getting. Of course, it's also a big investment. And I think what becomes difficult as a HR leader is you need to kind of be accountable for the quality of suddenly when you start mixing well-being with the professional environment. For example, I would always say to my HR partners, be careful that you're not taking the role of a therapist, because that's not your job and you're not qualified to be a therapist, right? And when we're starting to use solutions where we're offering that kind of service, it suddenly becomes the employer's responsibility as well. And so there's like some ethical questions that I find difficult, and how do you make sure that people are getting the quality support that they need when you're accountable for it? How do you deal with situations where people are not getting the help that they need? Are you then accountable? Right. So it raises a lot of questions. I wouldn't say that they've failed, but it raises questions, ethical dilemmas. And then we have this program with what we call mental health first aiders, where a lot of people get trained in mental health. Every year, we also have what we call belonging ambassadors that are trained, or who are trained in detecting problems with, for example, psychological safety and helping navigate those situations. Now, that also means, again, coming back to the ethical side, is that they will sometimes be faced with situations that are difficult. And as an employer, how do you make sure that those people that are facing those situations and dilemmas are both supported in the right way, but also that you are, that it's responsible from an employment perspective? I think those are some of the questions that I deal with, at least, or that I think about as a HR leader. And where I think things like well-being programs can go wrong.
Yeah. Do you think that the focus on well-being and the development in this space and the openness about these situations has created, I don't know, more challenges in a way, that it's sort of the openness creates more frustrations or room for complaints from employees? Or do you think it's just showcasing the problem that is there from before?
So I think openness is a good thing, period. I think we're seeing and hearing much more about people's struggles that we have before. I think it also makes the role of a leader, or the role of people teams, a lot more complicated than it has before. And you need to understand the complications that you're operating with, and you need to know when you can be the right support mechanism and when you shouldn't be. And being able to make those choices and have those conversations, for example, if people come to you and they need help and you detect that actually they need a doctor, it's really, really important to acknowledge that's a doctor that needs to be there, and you can help guide your employee to go there. Because otherwise, I think if you're a leader or an HR professional for that matter, that feel like you have to solve people's problems, then it becomes very challenging. And I think that's where the main struggle is. I have a lot of leaders who, because they are good, empathic people, who wants to help solve the problems.
If we spice the conversation a bit with the cultural component, and also maybe between generations and geographies and whatnot. So how do you view Gen Z coming into workspace, and also how well-being and performance is handled in different cultures? Maybe let's start with the generation aspect, and then we take on the world after that.
Well, I've always been fascinated about the generational differences, right? Now I've been in a company where Gen Z is a big part of the population, and it's the first time in my career where I've experienced the composition of the organization be very different to what I've been in. And it's been super interesting. I've learned a lot, but I've always said, I think Gen Z, they're expecting well-being. And they have the courage to say no if they don't get the support that they need. And I think they're here to teach us something. Those of us that are not Gen Z, like myself, I've always said that, look, I'm learning so much from this generation because they've learned to take care of themselves. And I think I'm glad that they're raising their voice. We also see, of course, that this means that I was just reading a report because I knew I was going on with this podcast, and I was looking into the data, and I was seeing that, okay, when you look at mental health problems, for example, you have, I think last year a study said that 23% of all adults have some sort of mental health problem. When you look at the age 18 to 25, it increases to 36%, right? And it just means that the younger population, there's a lot more struggle. And that also means, and probably just because they're more open about the struggles, right? It also means that we need as an organization, we need to think about how do we support that? It's no longer a question on if you have people with mental health problems. It's about, what are the kind of solutions you can offer to the different problems that people might face.
And what about the different cultures? If you think about the US, for example, which is a bit, especially different, very work hard, longer hours, more performance oriented in some aspects, maybe higher expectations in terms of availability, and numerous aspects that are different from the Nordic culture, at least. So how do you, I don't know if Pleo has presence in the US, how do you balance that? Or in Lego, for example, in other roles that you had, how do you balance that? How do you view that? Do you create a universal company culture on how we address the well-being and performance, or do you make local adjustments?
I think well-being is the difficult topic because it's, again, as I said in the beginning, it's individual, right? And well-being can mean a lot of different things. For one person, it's the work hours. For another person, it's, the ability to have healthy lunch every day. For a third person, it's financial freedom. So it's, and that I don't think you can solve it with, one approach. I do think that you have to make choices as an organization on what kind of company do you want to be. And I think now I've been in, both Lego and Pleo are Danish, right? And that means that, of course, you see that the Danish kind of values about balance and about flexibility and things like that are deeply ingrained in both. And that becomes a huge attraction point in other countries, right? So I think sometimes it's also about understanding what are the assets you have that you can, that might differentiate you globally. And then, of course, you need to, localize as well. We opened an office in India last year. And, their work ethics are very, very different. They work more hours. And we were talking about this. Should we have the same office hours? And should we have meetings at the same time? And how do we deal with this? And the reality was we had no clue, right? Because none of us had built an office in India before. It wasn't before we actually got people on ground to help us really build it, and understand the local culture, understand the fact that many of them needed, transportation from their home to the office was one of the most important benefits for them, to their well-being, because that was seen as a necessity. Being able to, cash was huge because a lot of them were also funding their parents' well-being. So well-being for them was to be able to take care of their family. So, well-being looks different in different cultures. And I think you need to be, as an employer, curious about you need to both be, what's my identity and what are kind of the things that I want to stand for as an organization. And then you need to be curious about what are the locations that I'm actually in and what's the kind of local culture and how do I make sure that I also adapt to those needs.
Great closing comments, Fia. Thank you so much for joining the ramp. Really appreciate the conversation and all the best on your new adventure.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.